Shinji and Warhammer40k Chapter 17 Don't Cry For Me, Tokyo-3, Part 1. Woo! The influence Second Impact had on human behaviour cannot be overestimated. It was more than just the sheer force of statistics saying that more than half of all humanity perished that day. It was more than the bland fact of saying that Adam's forced release of its power altered the planet's tilt. More than just saying that all the killing was stopped only by more killing, and that democracy as people once knew it was all but dead. It was an event to change the way humanity viewed itself. In the past century, the pivotal event was World War II. It showed conclusively that for evil to prevail, all that was necessary was for the good to do nothing. The lesson of Tokyo-3 was directly opposed to this. People were not naturally good or evil. They had a choice. But when it was really down to the choice of them or us, all could be cruel bastards when they had to. Half of humanity died, and they were still dying. Those alive were still tainted by that suffering. Case in point, Mana Kirishima, a girl aged 14 of average height and build, with dark brown hair reaching down to her shoulders and a shy, sad smile. She was what was known as a military orphan, whose parents were killed in the service of reclaiming civilization. The JSSDF had her as the direct counterpart to Shinji Ikari. In another time, she could have been the pilot of the Trident land cruiser machined weapons platform, the direct competitor to the Evangelion system. In that other place, the conditions seemed rather horrible, forcing her and her friends to flee, taking their tridents with them. However, with only the Jet Alone program as the other option, she instead was one of the shining youth being prepared for a life in the military. Her talents were moulded by the system, indoctrinated with all the beliefs of the New World Order. A system of beliefs repeatedly rocked to its foundations by the conventional forces' continued helplessness in the face of the angel threat. The older generation felt they had clear right to be pissed, but those still held back by their age only saw someone who exemplified what they all ached to do. That power to command, what they were being trained for yet constantly denied. No one was stupid enough to think they could handle Principio Eternus any better. To her credit, Mana Kirishima didn't attempt to immediately latch on to Shinji Ikari. This might have had plenty to do with the defensive screen around him, but in her briefing before being sent into Tokyo-3, the words "seduce young Ikari" was never explicitly stated. The word fangirl, however, was clear in the minds of all else there. A few might have even silently added creepy stalker to before fangirl. No one really had high hopes for a success. Tiptoe, tiptoe, peer around the corner. She saw him standing there, pondering his choices at the vending machine. Even in the simplest of tasks, he held such careful precision. It was as if his very existence put a historic weight on everything around him. He wasn't aware of it. He wasn't even trying to act cool, though playing it cool or escaping attention certainly applied. It was then a suitably dramatic wind passed through the open hall, and he turned to look at the sky. The sun, breaking out of the clouds, bathed the scene in a sudden, eye-opening light. A barely heard squee sound. He turned, frowning faintly. Mana whipped back to cover. She put a hand over her pounding heart. She took deep, even breaths. "Relax, Kirishima," she told herself. "You can do this. It's just talking. You can try talking. This is the perfect chance." "Kirishima," said one of the soldiers back at the base, who had seen the girl grow and loved her as a little sister. "Seduce anyone? You've got to be kidding. He has to be the most attention-deprived, spineless Russ in real life or fiction. He has to be even shyer than her, and that's... We're putting her in special ops, right? The girl should be a ninja." She put her hand on the wall to steady herself, and saw her fingers twitching. In fact, her entire body was shuddering in nervous tension. When it comes to Shinji Ikari, the supposed girlfriend of steel had a spine of jelly. She crouched down and brought out a small school paper, independently published by the more fringe elements of the press club as a tabloid counterpart to the school newspaper. Precipice Ponderous served as the vehicle of expression for all the different clubs, but mostly the three main personality cults. She hurriedly flipped through to the editorial. "What kind of girl does Shinji-sama like?" by L. Saotome. This is a question only he can answer. So far in all his interviews, he has evaded giving any definite criteria for this ideal. Specifics such as personality, appearance, or even in common interests remain a matter of guesses and personal attempts. However, it is also a question that already has an answer, somewhat. We can see hints in those women he has already admitted to be in a favourable relationship with. First is Ayanami Rei, and through her we can see the appeal of a calm, reserved demeanour that is beyond petty girlish concerns. She appears to have an inner sophistication that comes from being sure of one's own place in the world. She does not seem apprehensive of losing Shinji-sama's attentions. She is not clinging or demanding, and will apparently be a very low-maintenance girlfriend. In appearance, Ayanami is unusual with her paleness, blue hair and wet eyes. She seems very fragile and as such, classically beautiful. In terms of her intellect, those tests she even bothers to take are always scored perfectly. She is aloof, mysterious. The attraction of the unknown and forbidden shines from her like moonlight. He has already declared that they will stand together until time itself ends. It is still debated if it counts as a confession of romantic love. Regardless, Ayanami does more by doing nothing than by pining away for attention. Langley Soryu Asuka is someone who makes as many admirers as enemies with her every act and every word out of her mouth. She is brash, opinionated, and with self-confidence bordering on solid arrogance. Like her fiery red hair, her appeal is in the unpredictable and the lively. Called tsundere by some, it appears she cannot decide whether to love or hate Shinji-sama. This makes the relationship still exciting and full of various emotional tensions. Exotic looks and a very fit body characterises Soryu's appearance, having uncommon red hair and foreign blue eyes. She is a confirmed genius, having already graduated from an overseas university and is fluent in multiple languages. Her athletic ability is in the same way impressive. Her accomplishments are already enough to draw resentment from certain groups, and is not helped by her combative personality and a determination not to conform to the norm. It makes her unpopular to many as a match, but she actively challenges Shinji-sama, and seems to be capable of relating to most of his toils in trying to fit in. Certainly they seem to be most comfortable in being around each other than in interacting with civilians. Her appeal is being not merely beautiful, but also a person who is never boring to be around. Ibuki Maya is odd in that she is so much older than Shinji-sama, but not enough to be out of the running. She brings the allure of a mature woman and the benefit of that experience. It matters little what she had done before, but more on how she can expand his horizons. As a potential girlfriend, Ibuki seems most likely to be enjoyable company at any time. She looks younger than her years, and may still be mistaken for a teenager. The gap will mean less as the years go by, and statistically women do live longer than men. Contrary to her physical age, it is Ibuki that carries girlish appeal, with her shy demeanour and gentle face. As a lieutenant for nerve, she is doubtless very capable on her own. The other girls are pilots, and Ibuki too is connected to Shinji-sama through personal struggling. She can give him what girls can't: mature appreciation. Not sex, but complete understanding of what he's going through and simply being there, with knowledge of what he needs to keep going. She is simply what looks to be a very caring sort of person. Anyone that seeks to catch Shinji Ikari's eyes will have to contend with these formidable challenges. However, in retrospect and in view of these, it seems fairly obvious. Ikari Shinji wants a woman that can stand with him as an equal, and will be a good mother to his children. Even at his age, he shows such a keen sense of priorities. Indeed, any man who asks for anything more or less will have to deserve whatever it is that he gets. Mana took another deep breath and folded that sheet back into her pocket. She'd grown her hair a little longer to neck length as a median between Ayanami and Soryu. Many of her military friends said that it suited her. Would she consider putting it up in a ponytail? Considering what she knew of their fetishes, no. It was better in any case, for it was actually rather disturbing how much she looked like his mother with her hair before. "I can be cute," she said to herself. Real Genki, not Asuka's power angry. Girly, not girlish as Maya could be. She'd be attentive to his every need, unlike Ayanami. She was willing to give up everything for him, in true fangirl obsession. "I can be whatever you want me to be, Shinji Ikari." She doubted anyone could be so ready to offer oneself as sacrifice. She would be whatever he wanted her to be. These were her delusions, but the greatest hurdle was not trying to pass herself off as his perfect match, but rather her own severe lack of self-confidence. She was just so very normal. Sadly, even her blatantly deranged behaviour was of the norm too. Post-Impact Japan hid its funky weirdness well. She might not be his best choice, but she was the best the JSSDF, and the forces they represented, could bring to the table. Her own stalker attentions actually helped in their spying intentions. Mana took one last breath of courage and turned to look past the wall again. She let out that breath in a frightened and fell flat on her butt. "Ikari!" she exclaimed, at the face that was just then level with hers and was so close to almost kissing. She blushed immediately. He stood up and looked away, a faint redness to his face as well. "Why is he—" Abruptly, she realised the answer to that thought. Mana let out an eep and pushed down on her skirt. She sat up in a kneeling position, thighs closed. She began shaking again. Inside, she screamed, "No! Now he's going to think I'm vulgar! If I knew this might happen, I could have worn something less cutesy! Wait, do I want him to see my panties? Well, if he really wants to, then should I— Shut up! Shut up! What am I thinking? Ah!" Mana Kirishima, girlfriend of Steel, the underage spy, the most normal of all the girls around the young Ikari, and yet just as insane as the whole bloody lot of them. Contrary to most what people thought after spending extending periods of time around him, Shinji Ikari was not capable of reading minds. What he had was a keen sense of reading body language, going through the hidden nuances in words, and understanding just what it was people really wanted behind their own misguided desires. This, in company with such nearly prescient planning, mean that the frantic efforts to hide from him were useless. He didn't regard his fangirls with pity or disdain. He respected their aching need, their despair at being adrift in a world, and their search for meaning. He didn't underestimate what they could do. After all, even when almost all the Imperium turned against High Lord Vandai's reign, it was the brides of the Emperor, the proto-form of the Sisters of Battle, that were the last to give up their loyalty. He could see Mana was embarrassed for a variety of reasons that only made sense to herself. It was all probably blown out of proportion. He could feel her boiling emotions. Of course, he knew why she was there. Many intelligence efforts seemed rather clumsy in comparison to what he envisioned. "Kirishima-san, are you okay?" He held out his hand. "Please, let me help you." Hesitantly, she took his hand. He slowly pulled her back up to her feet. She was still looking down, her face hidden under the shadow of her bangs, still blushing heavily. "Thank you, Ikari-san." Hearing his voice was entirely different from the recordings. Why was it he chose such simple words that had such deep implications? Why, one could almost believe. "So you're covering for Aki-san as class monitor today? Good for you." A muffled explosion sounded in the distance, then the distinctive sounds of bolter fire. No one at the courtyard paid it the least bit of attention, going about their normal business. Mana nodded. She wouldn't actually kill him, would she? She was rather loud about any more of his foolishness." These people, they were all so unreal to her. In her regimented Spartan life, such things were well outside her imaginations. The realm of teenage angst, until Ikari, was closed to her. He shrugged. "Ikari, well, let's just say she's Asuka's best friend here for a good reason. She's a lot stronger than she appears, but she knows how to keep her own measure." Mana nodded. "Ikari-san." "Please, call me Shinji." He was meeting her eyes, and as if he would devour her. Her knees were shaking. Even at his gentlest, somehow he exuded the sense of a truly massive predator. It wasn't frightening, but rather comforting. She felt safe in the shadow of such power. "Shinji-san?" He sighed faintly. He hoped she wouldn't slip into the Sama prefix like so many others. The teen still didn't consider himself as anything special, even if at the age of 12 he practically owned his hometown. He winced at her adoring expression. He could, with such disturbing ease, evoke such fanatical loyalty among those he chooses to be his tokens in the great game. So much potential for abuse. Chaos all but begged to put such power to glorious use. The Eldar perspective was already well known. "Kirishima-san," he said simply. She stood up straight, betraying her soldiering heritage. "Yes, please meet at the rooftop after school. I have something very important to tell you." He smiled. Maya looked unhinged. Her eyes were glazed, her face was all red, her lips twitched a little. "Alone? At the rooftop?" Her research to teenage civilian life unfortunately was through manga and TV, most of which was sappy, unchallenging reruns evoking an earlier, more innocent age. Rooftops. Alone. There were so many scenes. Ugh! She was struck with the possibility. "Kirishima-san? Mana?" "Hey!" She snapped to attention and actually saluted him. "Yes, sir!" Shinji chuckled a bit. He took her right hand in his left, pulling it off her forehead and opening it palm up. He pressed the cup of milk tea onto her hand, closing her fingers over the container. Once sure she wouldn't just drop it, he let go. "Keep up the good work, eh?" He winked and made a thumbs-up gesture. Mana's shaking had subsided, but only to a barely discernible full body vibrating, as if she would explode violently at any given moment. Her face was still in shadow. Alright. See you later, Kirishima-san." He turned away and went off to join the others in PE. She remained motionless for minutes after he left. Then ever so slowly, a blink. She lifted her head, and upon her face was an expression of pure bliss. A sunbeam filtered down from the cloudy cover. She exhaled in relief. Mana put the cup up to her lips and drank. "He talked to me!" She was celebrating in her mind. He touched me!" Her inner self was garbed in full samurai armour and waving a flag around, incidentally that of a double-headed eagle. She began rubbing the paper cup on her cheek, as if it was a holy relic just by being touched by him too. "Oh, man, you're pathetic," someone said from behind her. "Ah! Killed!" The girl nearly jumped in surprise, spilling some of the drink. She turned, slowly, to see her two oldest friends standing there. Orphans too, they had known each other since, well, almost forever to their eyes. Musashi Lee Strasberg and Keita Sari were also 14, but assigned to different classes. Musashi stood taller, with a devil-may-care expression. His hair was bushy, and he had thick eyebrows for a boy his age, owing mostly to the American serviceman portion of his genes. Keita was the more thoughtful and bookish of the two, a sort of reverse Kensuke Ada, in that he was enamoured of the trappings of civilian life. For such a thin, glasses-wearing boy, he was quite the glutton for sweets and snacks. He waved sheepishly, then put his hand back into the pack of potato chips. "He's not that cool," continued Musashi. "I can probably kick his ass." "Heresy!" screamed the girl from within. However, she was also loyal to her friend, and as such resisted the first impulse to drop-kick him in the head. She blinked and let out a "Hurrah!" of outrage. She shakily pointed at them, her eyes watering up. "You traitors! Traitors!" Keita looked down, and at the blue armband he wore. Musashi was wearing a red bandana to hold back his hair. "Oh," said the two. "The school population is rather polarized," said Keita between munches. "It's rather difficult not to get pulled in. The clubs are all organized with drink ups. Most of the athletic organizations are in the red zone. Chess club, astronomy club, all the state scholarly pursuits are in the blue zone. Many neutral and public service clubs are in the brown zone. There are very few non-aligned clubs or students left." "This place is whacked," huffed Musashi. "Polarized, the Sari-kun. North Pole, South Pole, where's the West Pole and East Pole?" The other boy glanced aside, as if to say, "I know you're thinking of something stupid again. Please don't inflict it on me by putting it to words." Many of the boys supported the three main contenders for Akari, for it was considered that if he was occupied with any of those three, then he wouldn't be eyeing any of their girls. The two from the JSSDF nodded at the remembering. They could so clearly understand that logic. But you're supposed to be helping me," Maya said softly. We can't just set up a fan club overnight, you know," said Keita, in lieu of the thought. "Are you nuts? We can't give you up to Akari." Musashi's blood was boiling at just the thought of it. For too long he'd seen himself as her protector. And maybe, even eventually... He turned away to hide his face. Mana wiped her eyes and looked up. "I won't give up!" she exclaimed, shaking her fist. "Shinji-sama, please see me! See my resolve! I mustn't run away! I won't be a coward anymore!" Another suitably dramatic wind passed, and her longer hair moved to emphasise her creed. Her friends, just boys, both sighed. As the JSSDF children left, two heads poked out from a nearby bush, one with blue hair, the other red. Given how high profile they both were, it was almost a miracle they were able to evade all attention while together. "I see. This tetragon is at risk of turning into a pentagon," said Ray, still tonelessly. "I'm not in love with the baka," Asuka said hotly. "He's a friend! Damn it! I like him as a friend! I'm not jealous! I'm just watching out for his own good!" "Regardless of what you say, Pilot Tsuyu, a girl spy. It is interesting." "I knew something was up with her!" She turned and squinted at Ray. "Should I be surprised at how good you are with this? Stalking, I mean." "I have had much practice out of you," the first child didn't say. "If Pilot Akari sees no cause for concern, then I believe we must simply let it be. It is said that a known spy is of much better use than a dead one." "So, we're going to try and find out what she knows? Spying on the spy. How ironic." Asuka blinked, remembering something suddenly. Rooftop. Alone. "Wait! If she's here to seduce him, damn you, Baka Shinji! I don't care about her orders, but if you do anything..." "Not jealous, Pilot Tsuyu?" "No!" Ray smiled. "I believe it will be better if I attempt to make friends with her." Gendo had returned to a happy city. That euphoria quickly shriveled in any place that had his presence. He was annoyed, not just with seeing how things had grown all so informal in his absence, but that the first thing he had to do after being summoned overseas was put a report in to Seal. He waited in the darkest conference room, and one by one, arriving with an electric hum, those who supposed himself his masters arrived.
"I am sure you are pleased, Akari,"
said Lorenz Keel.
"Damage to your city is nearly zero, and casualties are the lightest it has ever been. Your Evangelions performed well."
Gendo grit his teeth, but other eyes didn't respond.
"But every indication until it was all done spoke of great disaster. Luck, you were too lucky. The slightest misstep could have doomed us all. You left Nerve with orders to engage in such reckless behavior."
"You know how vital it is for us to take an intact angel specimen," said Gendo. Despite what it seemed, Seal did not send the angels. The creatures had their entirely own agenda. However, they could dictate to some extent the when and the where such attacks would happen. Just as Ray, created from the cell of Lilith, was not a representative of all the myriad evolutionary choices open to the Great Mother and humanity, so did Kaworu refuse to enlighten Seal with all the secrets of angel physiology. Most of all, the infinite power of the S2 engine was still forbidden to them.
"Such behavior is what caused second impact in the first place,"
said the Seal slab numbered 3. Only the leader had visual, everyone else was in audio only.
"Keep to what you should be doing, Akari. Nerve America is suited for such research." "How far along are they?"
asked Seal 7. "Evangelion Unit 3 is complete, but lacking a suitable pilot," replied the commander. "It would be unwise to make adjustments in that area until it may be ready for combat here in Japan." In other words, no one had any idea yet which souls to sacrifice to its hunger. "Unit 4 is lagging in structural development, but the prototype S2 engine is almost complete. There is nothing to do now but to wait and see. Either it will work, or it will fail."
"The loss of one Evangelion is insignificant compared to the promise of absolute power,"
muttered Seal 2. Seal 5 gave a cough.
"Akari."
Gendo made no response.
"Rein in your son,"
said that SEAL member.
"You are being too permissive. Now is not the time to play at being a father. The scenario must be maintained. Control your son, or we will do it for you."
"The boy is of no consequence," said Gendo. It irked him more that he would even be brought up in such a meeting. The pilot was the least important part of the Evangelion. He suppressed a smirk. Unless these old fools mistakenly believed he could be held back by any affection for his son. Could this be some form of threat? What controls would these fossils even place upon the boy? Interesting, he thought. An interesting slip of the tongue. That which was meant as a warning instead gave him the last hint he needed of the boy being manipulated into power as a counterpoint to him. But it was too clumsy and too late. The boy was too young and too ignorant. Third impact will happen, and by his terms. However, from the mouth of snakes, occasionally wisdom appears. He did need some way of controlling the boy's insane excesses. Rei alone could not be enough. Causing her suffering was a simple, effective solution, but at the cost of a useful pilot. The members of SEAL each switched off, leaving him there in the dark to brood over his machinations. Finally, he smirked. Akagi might be displeased about it, but on the whole, little Ibuki was really not all that invaluable. He ran his gloved fingers over the table and flipped up a terminal set into its surface. Gendo put in his highest security code and accessed the Magi to see her recent activities. Maya took a bite of her sandwich and chewed slowly. She took a sip of cold green tea from a brick carton. To everyone there in the cafeteria, it was just another one of her casual, if effective, working habits. She began to cough. She took a deeper drink through the straw. Then she smiled, almost savagely. "Got you, bastard!" she whispered. "Now you're mine. You will hold no secrets from me." Those other programmers there smiled. The joy at finally tracking down that last tricky bug in the code. Bravo, Miss Ibuki. Bravo. The bell rang. "Stand!" said Hikari. "Bow!" And thus, class ended for the day. Man Kirishima watched Shinji walk over to Asuka and speak to her briefly. He was asking if she could just head home ahead, as he still had things to do. The girl seemed coolly irate for some reason, and glanced briefly at her. Mana shrank back. "Does she know?" However, it seemed the red-haired pilot relented and gave him a dismissive rave. Rei walked past, only giving them both a slight nod as a goodbye. Mana, like Rice, fled from the room, to get right ahead to the roof. It would be improper to keep him waiting for her. Instead, she was interrupted at a hallway by her friends. Both looked disapproving, and pulled her into a secluded stairwell. "What is it now, guys?" she asked. "Look, just don't get ahead of yourself, alright?" said Musashi. "We'll be close by in case you need any help." "We need to know more about Nerve and the piloting system of the Evers. That's our mission. Don't expect too much out of Hikari. Remember, he's not our ally in this," was added by Keita. The seriousness of his tone was ruined slightly by the striped lolly he held in his right hand. Mana rubbed at the bridge of her nose. "You guys," she groaned out. "Alone! We need to be alone! I'll put it all in a report later. What do you think he could do to me up there? Yeesh, it's like you're expecting him to be some serial rapist or something." "Well, I wouldn't discount that just yet. With his type, you never know," muttered Musashi. "The intense loner, the quiet ones, they're always the ones most likely to go crazy." "Don't make me hurt you, Sashi-kun," Mana said, perhaps all too happily. "Oops. Yeah, she's one of those too." "We just don't want you hurt, emotionally or otherwise. He's not some god, you know. All heroes have feet of clay. Don't be disappointed to learn he's just as human and so fallible like anyone. No one's perfect." "Shinji-sama!" Mana stopped that train of thought. The military was no place for too much optimism. She was trained that rationally. It was far better to prepare for the worst than hope for the best. Always prepared, Always ready. That was the way to survive. Even so, she whispered. She took a deep breath. They were just concerned. She couldn't fault them for that. Thank you. I'll be all right. She glared at them, but they found that more cute than frightening. But you two had better not be hanging around listening. It'd be too embarrassing. Both sighed. Yeah. The rooftop was clear of any others, and the floor directly below was all but cornered off by the Student Security League. These least gossipy of the volunteer troops were sometimes also known as the Chamber Orders, when called up by Hikari, or Immediate Guards, when by Toji. In this instance, it was both. This unofficial clique was the only true neutral party in the Colour Wars. They were there to safeguard all the pilots, no questions asked. Those getting too uppity in the Tokyo-3 SS were quickly given the worth of power speech by Hikari. Those who still misbehaved were given the choice of transferring out or getting a safe bolt to the rear. Tokyo-3 First Municipal Primary Junior High was most definitely not a democracy. This was something that was actually a comfort to Mana. Despite her best efforts, he was already rating there. However, before she could get up on the roof, she had to get past Ayanami Rei, who was there rating as well. She was standing on the first step in the last flight of stairs up to the open stairwell doors. The blue-haired girl looked calm and unchallenging. Mana's fingers twitched. She was expecting having to butt heads with Asuka Langley Soryu eventually. She wasn't afraid. However, Ayanami Rei was something else. It struck her then how similar their old hairstyles were, though hers was slightly more boyish, as expected for someone in her lifestyle. The other girl's odd, red-eyed gaze, though. How am I going to fight that? She commented to herself. She looks so fragile. It's like I could break her in half so easily. But she died first before letting go of him. Oh, Shinji-sama. Rei stepped down. Mana drew a single foot back, then gulped. Summoning her courage, she stood up straight to match that stare. Rei stepped closer. She kept her rigid stance. Rei was incontestably violating her personal space. Mana refused to flinch. And Rei smiled. Mana felt as if stabbed. Ah! So elegant! She's not a civilian, is she? Is there some way I can train to do that? You have a pleasing scent, said the blue-haired pilot, inhaling with such deliberate slowness. She quirked her lips and drew back. It is strange. Your emotions are pure. Even your fear is without chaos. But still, so much doubt. Mentally, Mana added to her report. Ayanami Rei's just weird. She looks weird. She speaks weird. I think I'd have to break my mind before I can even attempt to try and outguess this girl. Do you dare put yourself between us, even if you have no power to call your own? Mana Kirishima thought back to her days in the orphanage, crying alone, until the two boys arrived to become her shield and her strength. She remembered talking with those soldiers willing to spend their downtime entertaining a base brat, and then never again seeing some of them, transferred out or dead. Such was the life of a soldier. She didn't know her parents. Her name, Kirishima, was her only clue. There were 4 dead soldiers with that surname in the registry, of those old enough to be her possible parents. She had no idea which of them was her father or mother. She remembered being proud to be inducted into the preparatory course along the long road to command school. They tried to break her, and they almost succeeded, moulding her into what the world needed in its protectors. Her old self remained in the company of her best friends. She needed nothing more than them. The core was her father, the mission her mother. She was human through and through, and in her duty longing to be a machine. Humans who want to be tools. That was purpose too. She felt her training take over, her eyelids drooping lazily, yet at the same time now becoming more aware of her surroundings. She tensed up. Her hesitation faded away. She remembered her first sight of the Evangelion, so huge and vicious against the angel Sachil. She remembered hearing how many lives it had saved. The opinions of her immediate superiors shaped her. While the brass were still undecided and even hostile sometimes, the rank-and-file men viewed young Ikari with favour. Mana made her own inquiries. What she found blew her mind. Deep attachments were of course discouraged among her colleagues. Her friends that were boys had never really appeared to her as boyfriends, much as they might want. Shinji Ikari was her equivalent of a rock star, given as girls raised in the military wouldn't be so easily swayed by unproven pretty boy looks. When Shinji Ikari spoke, others rushed to obey. Even she could see that. He was someone who would command without thinking his people were nothing more than tools or numbers on a board. He cared, that much was obvious. What did she want, really? A boyfriend? A lover? Or the perfect commander? She felt herself twisting into a returned smile, almost savage. "Yes," she hissed out softly. "It doesn't matter." What she wanted, she wasn't sure. Only what he needed was important. "I dare!" Ray nodded slightly. "He waits for you." She stepped aside. Ray knew absolutely no fear. This Kirishima. Either she would prove herself worthy, or be crushed under the weight of his shadow. Mana bowed, acknowledging that given chance. She stepped up, one foot over the other, feeling as if she was entering a realm that would not so easily let her free. She would need to decide, and it would rule her life. Heading up into the light. Below her, Ray sighed softly. Her vision was less plagued by the dramatic. It was just a stairway. It was just a door. It was just a roof. People were so incomprehensible. All so many thoughts and emotions and doubts they didn't need. A pity there was such a shortage of grots around Tokyo-3 now. She had very little stress to relieve, but it was always enjoyable to throw a few idiots around. Mana Kirishima winced, as the sun was still bright even though setting. She blinked the spots away from her vision and sought out Shinji Ikari. She found him a distance away, standing near the railings. Any other teenage boy would have leaned on the bars, slouching in what they thought was a cool pose. His back was straight, his hands clasped behind his back akin to a parade rest. He stared out at the city. His city, which he had loved and protected. The sun was sinking behind him. He looked very much to her eyes like a young king. "So cool," she squeaked out. As a military brat, it should be made clear that her standards were vastly different from other girls her age. Kittens were cute, common fact. Frills were childish, also a similar decision. Pink was bleh, depending upon the individual preference. As for what was defined as cool, others liked to dance and those who could sing. She found it enjoyable to drive a tank at full speed and admired those who fired with accuracy, even with the onboard computer turned off. Kittens were cute. Shinji Ikari was not cute. Well, okay, maybe a little, she admitted. Like amphibious assault tigers. Cuddly, yet insanely dangerous. She approached slowly, almost warily. He looked so deep in thought that it pained her to have to interrupt whatever it was he was meditating on. It couldn't be her. She was too simple. She didn't rate such concentration. However, Shinji Ikari did indeed have a plan. Slowly, inexorably, everything boiled away to one inescapable conclusion. He couldn't make a scenario with Ray and Asuka anymore. Ray was already, in every possible way, the scenario itself. Asuka was just so unpredictable. Yes, she could be coerced into specific paths, but it reduced her effectiveness. Maya, Misato, Hikari, Toji, Kensuke and the others. They had their parts to play, but on the fringe, as they either couldn't be risked or had little to really contribute. It would have severely disturbed the generals of the JSSDF that their decision to send Mana Kirishima wasn't made as spontaneously as they thought. The idea of sending someone to seriously attempt to seduce young Ikari could only backfire horribly, same with the notion of a competent spy. A possible friend was better than an outright bribe or knife in the back. Who was so much more of a non-threat that even if the links to the JSSDF were uncovered, there would be little backlash, if any. "Hello, Kirishima-san," he spoke without looking, and his voice had lost the self-effacing tone he used when announcing normal people. He turned, and while his face was friendly, his eyes were all the more intense. Mana found herself standing straight. "Shinji-san!" Her fingers twitched, and she barely held back the urge to again salute. He was a civilian. He wasn't supposed to know. Yet she had never been around anyone who just seemed to shine with that sort of commanding presence. He smiled and tilted his head to the side, and all that cutting mood just drifted away. He motioned to his left, and she stood there beside him, staring out near the building's edge. Mana breathed in the revitalizing fresh mountain air. You ever been to many cities, Kirishima-san? Mana nodded slowly. She was found somewhere in Okinawa, but ended up around Fukuoka-2 as the naval base there was surrendered to UN control. Her guardians moved to the Matsumoto region, or Tokyo-3, as she was inducted into the cadre of future officers. The JSSDF was meant as a watchdog over the new Japanese army, and could be called into a greater task force when quelling other belligerent nations. Shinji would have recognised it as similar in many ways to the Imperial Guard, and approved accordingly. We've seen a few big cities, but she couldn't really say she'd ever really been in them. She and her friends had spent a few grades in public school, but even at their ages they couldn't adapt to the hurried pace of the metropolis. Even the sternest of the teachers seemed to them as wasting energy, and all the other people pursued such fleeting concerns. I grew up in a small town up in Sendai. It's nothing like here. Shinji swept an arm at the scene. That place where nothing seems to happen, like it was its own world apart from everything else. All the violence, all the scars. It seemed so unreal to us who lived there. It sounds nice, Mana had to say. She closed her eyes. Laughter, peace and family. The finest of things, and he had it. She admired him, and now envied him, a twinge of resentment even there. She opened them again, saw his curiosity, and stared shyly down. Why'd you come here? She whispered. My father asked for me. I just had to know why, after all this time. Until Tokyo-3, I don't remember ever being inside a big city. But I'm told I was actually born here. I was sent away. He exhaled loudly. It took some time before I began to think of this at home. This place. The city looked as if proud to her eyes. It still bore the scars of its defiance, in the highway still slashed through, skeletal building frames, and the big hole right through a mountain range. She felt nothing for it. No sympathy. Just assets, just terrain. The civilians were numbers to keep out of the casualty column. It's home now. I'll fight to defend it, but this roar affects more than just this city. Mana turned and saw he was still focused on the horizon. Melancholy, she realised. That was the word she was looking for. His every glance was tinged with that, as if everything was all doomed and all the more precious for that. While they still existed, they were to be cherished. Do you believe it's possible to win? He smiled slightly. Possible? I'd like to call it inevitable. We just don't know what we're willing to give up to ensure that. He tilted his head back. You and I will fight. Do you think it's right, Kirishima-san? To suffer and die for those who'll never know? To sacrifice a few for the sake of the many who just don't understand, who might not even care? Ours is not to question why, she replied softly. Such was the soldier's duty. Ever has it been since the first tribes. Someone had to put their own safety below that of the group. I think it's worth it. It may not be right, but yes, we should. It wouldn't be right either to just stand aside. Only we can be blamed for our own choices, eh? This pain is ours to take. We can bear it. Either we do this, or we let someone suffer in our place. She winced. His tone so far had been too formal. So you know. It was a legend to the boys that the boss knows everything. Obviously, Shinji Ikari was not omniscient. He did, however, have almost full access to the Magi. She was three useful things to him. First, as a spy, he controlled what information they had. Second, as a bribe to him, she was ready for whatever purposes he had in mind. Third, as a hostage of goodwill to seal their deal. The fact that the generals thought he might still be susceptible to this sort of approach only reinforced his scenario. He'd been expecting it, actually. Everyone was still underestimating him. I'm not displeased, Kirishima-san, he added. It's genuinely pleasant to have you around. I hope you'll enjoy our stay in this city. She nodded, struck numb by his demeanour. It was like silken wrappings all fell aside to reveal the sharpened steel of his will. She was beyond fear by then, only capable of watching and responding. This was her best dream coming true. Romantic notions were vague, unfamiliar affairs that seemed false even in her dreams. Speaking from their respective spheres of order was far more comfortable to her.
Seriously,
she said to herself.
Shinji Ikari, hesitant and fumbling with words, trying to express his feelings of sudden attraction. No way, Kirishima. Grow up. I should hate you, you know,
she said in a low tone, her grip on the handrail tight.
We're nothing else but this duty, supposed to be enders of war in our generation. We were made to fight and hate each other, forged into command. We knew what children should be like, and we were not them. We were meant to stand between civilization and the darkness in men's hearts. We had no one else. We had nothing else.
She let go abruptly and bit her lip. She blinked away, tears threatening to fall. She refused to look up and let him see her girlish weakness. She was supposed to be a soldier, damn it.
It was supposed to be our duty, and suddenly you come out of nowhere without any previous training whatsoever and made worthless everything we've ever gone through. You had a childhood. You were happy. I should hate you.
Why don't you?
What kind of soldier would I be if I destroyed the best chance we had of winning this war? This is all I know.
Her voice choked up. She needed something to believe. A worthy death was the only thing her lifestyle offered. Honour was such an intangible quality. Shinji inched closer and reached out to put a hand on her shoulder. She stilled and he drew back. How are you adjusting so far to my city, Kirishima-san?
Yours?
Of course, he protects it.
I think I'm doing well, sir. It's a good place to live.
She was starting to see what it was she was so willing to defend. He excused her slip. Others have died to make it a place where people can still live. Even more will die. As I'm sure you'll be watching over me, seeing if I'm worth all their sacrifices.
You are!
She wanted to shout, but her discipline restrained her. Shinji turned to face her. Please be free to make your report as you see fit. However, also tell them this. My name is Shinji Ikari and I will protect this city. We are allies. We both want the same thing, to stop Third Impact. If they're concerned about what I might be doing with the Evangelion once it's all done, if there's a war to come, then tell them this. Don't you dare hold anything back. We must give everything. All of humanity must do what they can to survive.
What?
Mana felt pinned down, as if he was blaming her for something.
Are you doubting our resolve? My people, they gave their lives even just to slow down those things.
He closed his eyes and felt the chill breeze. At whose orders? At what last attempt to hang on to the status quo? This is no time for power plays. Power and wealth mean nothing to me. You can't plan for the future when there won't be a future if we fail.
Ikari-san! Their sacrifices weren't meaningless!
She slapped at the wailing and faced him indignant.
I believe it was worth it to protect the lives and the happiness of these people. When the angels are gone, we still need to stand up as their protectors.
She was taken aback. Did he, after all, hold any other power than his in contempt? He just sighed. Always that ageless sadness behind his dark eyes. At the same time, that sense of something immeasurable waiting to be unleashed. I'm not my father, said Shinji. The future is yours, not mine. I don't have any place in it, not as you expect me to be. I don't want to fight you, not the nation, Miss Kirishima. I don't intend to go from battle to battle, living in the shadow of war. Let me end the enemies of humanity. Against humanity itself, I won't fight.
Is that... I assure you, sir, we don't intend anything like that. You have our full support in this. What makes you think we're not doing all we can?
Her voice rose to a desperate pitch.
We're doing all that we can. We're ready to give up our lives. You are the only one fighting for humanity. This is what we are. What more do you need?
I don't need your assurances. I don't need your well wishes. I need you standing with me against the enemies of humanity. Third Impact will destroy the world. This is no hyperbole. We can't survive it. He shook his head. If Tokyo-3 falls, humanity will die. The angels have made their choice. This is where they'll initiate Third Impact. I will fight anyone who attempts to trigger that. Do you understand, Miss Kirishima? I'm asking for help in case that happens. He put his hands over her shoulders and stared into her teary eyes. He pleaded with his tone and his soul. No one must try to attempt to wield that power. It can only destroy us. It would be too stupid an end. Yes, sir. She stared numbly, as if hypnotized. The deadly sincerity in him was etching into her being. Shinji didn't even have to do anything. She was ready to bring herself to a trance all on her own. I understand, sir. I will. He frowned slightly. Weak-willed followers he didn't need. That leads to chaos, and while that might be useful in the short term, his power needed to be built at a constant and unseen, if unstoppable, rate. Power quickly gained is also quickly lost. He was only 14, and he had to go against Nerve, the UN, SEAL, and other things that existed only in capital letters. There was no other choice but to keep moving forward. Kirishima! He said loudly. She blinked and snapped out of her daze. A strong wind then passed between them. He stepped closer, and though she was only just about her height, he seemed all the more imposing. The golden cloak of the setting sun didn't help things any. She felt her nose stuff up. You're ready to fight. You're ready to die, but your life isn't something to just waste in some futile gesture of defiance. He stepped closer and spoke directly to her face. What do you want, Miss Kirishima? Me? She grew frantic. Not fair. Not fair at all. I don't... You! She began screaming inside as she realised what she'd just said. Her face blossomed into red. Her heart began to pound. She felt like smashing her head again and again into a brick wall. People could seemingly change personalities and obey Shinji Ikari with such disturbing ease. It was as if he could just walk up to anyone, say, "Follow me," and they would. It, however, was not merely due to force of personality. He chose each and every one of them with keen discernment, seeing in them the choices they ached to make. It was more like they called out for him. They each agreed with his views, and by their own will followed behind in the road he was carving out. Sycophants and slaves he didn't need. More often than not, such petty paddings for the ego ruined what could have been great leaders. Here, however, he had met one such person that could warp her personality at his merest whim. Mana was entirely too normal for all her hidden angst. There were many others like her, but none such as her. Her military upbringing merely worsened the situation, instead of how others hoped would buffer with her ingrained discipline. Like it or not, she was indeed his biggest fan. That was also quite sad, in a way. Shinji Ikari had sworn never to let anyone suffer again, under his sight. If his sight had to expand, if he had to find a way to see everything all simultaneously, then so be it. For all the maturity he displayed on the outside, it also remained that Shinji is a good boy, wielding a spoon and wearing a pot for a helmet, driving the paper armies against those who are blatantly bad. It was simple within. Whatever power he had would be put to worthy use or not at all. Waste was the enemy. She was suffering too. His unique power, if it could even be called that, was to take weakness and turn it into one's own greatest strength. He slowly smiled. You are Mana Kirishima, and upon this steely heart I will shape a world that will plunge fearless into the endless night. Shinji put his hand to her chin and tilted her face up. Don't be afraid, Mana. You'll do great things. I believe in you. Shinji! Her eyes were wide, her face all twitching. The fear in her was burning away, replaced by something she couldn't identify. What are you saying? She stepped away and stared at him, taken aback by his sheer... whatever the hell it was that he was doing. Can you really do that? Could I really? Kirishima-san, you came here wanting to know. I'll show it to you. He pointed up. Follow me and we'll pierce the heavens. Believe in me and we shall hold eternity in our palms. It was at this point that a flock of pigeons chose to fly up right behind him. A strong wind blew, carrying with it a strange whistling sound. A faint whisper. In him, all things are possible. Too cool. Mana Kirishima toppled forward. Shinji quickly moved, despite being caught by surprise as well, and caught her in his arms. She was already unconscious. A thin rivulet of blood dripped down her nose. Whatever the hell she was imagining was perhaps better left unsaid. He felt her forehead. She had a slight fever. Uh-oh. He wasn't intending for it to be that dramatic, recognising that such means of emotional control were too akin to the rays of chaos. The demagogue was a clumsy operator, pitching a crowd into mindless fervour. He planned on appealing to both the heart and the mind, forcing both awe and logic into something unbreakable. He needed humanity ready to join the fight. He'd expected having to explain his reasons still, when she would respond with the understandable disconnect to his blatant oratory. Yeah. Oops. He'd underestimated her impressionability. Musashi and Keita stepped out onto the rooftop and saw her there, swooned into his embrace. Their eyes narrowed. Oops again. They fell flat on their faces, made unconscious by Ray. They were foolish enough to force their way past her, ignoring her warning. She stood there, having pinched their necks and lifted an eyebrow at him. Gentle amusement was within her. Okay, damage control. Can't piss off the JSSDF if we want to use them. At the same time as Shinji was warping an innocent young woman to his will, Asuka was walking home alone. She was, as usual, angry in some level. The passing month since the latest Angel attack was, despite her constant protests about the aggravation, among the best times of her life. As much as Ray needled her on some unknown deep personal level, she could call the other girl a friend. Hikari, of course, was much closer to her. They both loved to make fun of. Yeah, that's it, of their own respective idiots. Even Geek Boy Ada was amusing sometimes. The others in the school treated her with the respect she expected, and the lousy fanboys all kept a tolerable distance away. To deserve their praise, to be given their due. That was all she ever really wanted. Of course, she still had to be the best, but she no longer felt the need to destroy others to reach that level of self-esteem. She was mastering her rage instead of just letting it rule her. Her blood sang in combat, and outside of it she knew the worth of her strength. Friends. Asuka stopped along a deserted street. She sniffed and grinned slightly. Friends? It was odd. She was so determined only a few months ago to live alone. Now she just couldn't imagine life without them. She felt stronger than ever before, more alive than she'd ever been. It was why being excluded hurt her. There was still something they were keeping from her. She had enough of being a stranger looking in. It still felt as if she was being held as unworthy still. Trust. Even as she found that hard to give, she also ached for that from others. Only then could she perhaps lower her own defences. Masato was welcoming, but time spent in the labs with Ritsuko was a worthy expense of her time. Sometimes Maya was there and she just couldn't see it. All the while people tried to link her with Shinji, Asuka could only conclude that she was just too sisterly for that. She couldn't imagine the young woman as a rival for... She started moving again. No, rival for what? Shinji's affection? Ritsuko Akagi's attention? No, nothing being repressed here. No sirree. She affirmed once more to herself that all the courage and all the self-confidence she had displayed to the world was indeed all she was. Asuka looked up as she approached a rise in the road. She saw there someone waiting at the height of the slight bump in the terrain. He was leaning, slouched and casual, against an electric post. He saw her approaching and grinned lopsidedly. Very much like Kaji's, but kinder and without expectations. He waved at her, slowly. She rushed to him, without of course making it seem like she was being unladylike. Kaworu-kun! She stopped and tried to catch her breath. She hoped he excused the flush in her face as from the exertion. The grey-haired teen tilted his head to the side and let out a chuckle. Hello, Soyu-san. It's good to see you again. You're back! Her expression was beaming. So I am. I think I might stay here for a while this time. Asuka looked him over. He had a lanky build, but somehow solid and confident. He exuded an aura that seemed to say, I'm too lazy to kick your ass right now, but if I'm motivated enough, make no mistake, you're going to be all over the place. Unlike Shinji's careful premeditation, his eyes were always playful, and his face holding a hint of mischief. Also, whereas young Hikari seemed ready to snap and let loose a torrent of destruction at any moment, Nagisa was always loose and accepting. Any violence he might do would apparently only be at great reluctance, though no less thorough.
Your hair. Your eyes. I think they're darker now. Are the treatments working?
He nodded, his grin getting wider. You could say they're more than working. I feel more alive, more filled with purpose than I've ever felt before. Asuka fiddled with her hair clips.
I'm glad.
So, how have you been, Siryu-san? The hybrid started walking towards the pilot's apartment, and unconsciously she began to follow at the same pace. They walked side by side, but it was he that directed the flow of their movements.
You don't have to be so formal with me, you know,
said Asuka, pouting. I don't think I've earned the right to call you Asuka-chan yet, Miss Siryu.
But I want you to!
He chuckled again. Kaworu pointed at a bench along the path, and they made their way over to it. First, please tell me about you and your days in Tokyo-3. Then I'll say something about what I've been doing in France and America.
Huh? Europe and the Americas? That's so cool!
She kicked her feet out and lolled her head on the backrest.
I'm stuck here in this boring little place.
Boring? I would think being under threat of total annihilation would be anything but.
You'd think so. It seemed like it. But even the angels are... They're not really that much of a challenge. Baka Shinji keeps trying to show off, but he really needs us there to keep him from making an even bigger fool of himself. We defeated the last angel, not him. He never had a chance.
Oh? We? You mean Ayanami?
Yeah, Ray.
She shrugged. You no longer sound quite so antagonistic towards her.
Oh, don't get me wrong. She's still a doll. Worse than that, a useless doll. She's not really all that perfect, even if she tries to be. I pity her a little, actually.
Fury still fueled her, but her skill had vastly improved without having to cheat for it. She'd earned that power, every iota, and thus became far stronger than what could have been otherwise. If she faced herself back then, and projecting forward using that old self-absorbed reason for fighting, as she was now, it would simply be too easy to win. Skirmishing repeatedly against those she could accept as her equals honed her skills to a bleeding edge. A berserker dumbass charge against those who were simply so methodical in combat only leads to an early loss. She fought. Sometimes she won, sometimes she lost. Such little setbacks no longer bothered her. It was all rather even. Shinji's wins in actual combat were mostly out of defying rationality to pull off an unlikely victory. Ritsuko was adamant not to allow him to break the laws of physics in her simulations. Rei was learning not to rely too much on Daka and to jump right into the fray when necessary. Close combat was still Asuka's specialty. It was all good. Even in losing, she could only get stronger, for she could see where her tactics had failed. She'd correct it next time, and she'd therefore win until the others thought of something new to challenge her with. Kaworu smiled. You seem to be at ease now. You've finally found your power, haven't you? They can't do without you.
Of course! Everyone must play their part for the greater good. When one fails, all will fail.
She leaned back and laughed.
I have to be strong and hold up my end. Let them play around as I like. I'm Ang Soryu the Great, and I'm the best at what I do.
Piloting the Evangelion?
No, being me.
Kaworu applauded. Very, very good, Asuka. I deeply admire your wisdom in this. Now you have a strength, an inner power that no one can take away. He smiled happily. You won't break just from external forces. She blushed and looked away.
Well, what about you? What have you been doing?
Nothing so exciting, unfortunately. I was with my sponsors for a while. Then I went out to visit my brothers. They're all over the world. We're a well-connected family.
Are you working for anyone?
Asuka said suddenly, now aware of just how convenient he was. Kirishima was a female spy. He was... Well, yes, it's an acquisitions and investment firm of sorts. They're shouldering the costs of my treatment. It's all due to my mother, really. They owe her a very big favour, and I thought I might as well be useful to look at opportunities in the cities I'm going to be trapped in for some time anyway.
I'm sorry.
He shrugged. It's all right. Sorry to say, too, that really not everything revolves around the Evangelions. He stopped and cupped his chin. Fine, perhaps everything might revolve around them, considering they're what's keeping you from destruction. But sometimes we really need to live the only way we can.
So, forgive me for thinking you were trying to take advantage of me?
For the first time, Kaworu groaned out. Do you have to put it like that? Although, he paused and smirked. You are very lonely. Asuka hid her face in her hands.
Oh, stop!
Normally such remarks would be replied with an, of course. She was embarrassed, though. He said it with as a matter of fact, not tinged with foolish infatuation. The girl peeked through her fingers.
You know, you sound so wise beyond your years. Did you get that from your business, or is that something you're just born with?
Kaworu laughed. Oh, please. The people I have to get along with are such self-loving, unrepentant, nasty bloodsuckers of the worst sort. Just talking with you is a treasure. There is simply no comparison.
I sympathise, said Asuka with a wince. Do you really need to meet with them very often?
More often than I'd like, was his response, but I doubt I'll have to endure them for much longer. They believe they have some hold over me, but soon enough, I'll be free. Then I can let them see what they're trying to command without understanding. For a moment, a tiny and positively evil smile crossed Kaworu's face. Asuka found that rather thrilling. They talked more and laughed at each other's stories. The sun slowly fell and the blue in the sky faded into red, then towards darkening purple. Kaworu breathed in the bitter edge of the night air. He turned towards Asuka and began to stare at her intently. She quickly grew uncomfortable under that. I've been around the world, and all through my travels, my thoughts kept drifting to you. I've searched for those worthy and found none such as you.
Kaworu-kun, what?
He reached into his pocket. Seiyu-san, would you please accept this as a token of my esteem? Kaworu brought out a pendant and showed it to her. It glittered under the amber of the setting sun. On a solid gold chain was a strange circular amber piece etched with a geometric pattern. A smaller circle, white ivory, touched the top half of a larger circular etching, silver all around. Red was inlaid into the background, separated by a vertical line extending down from the white circle. Upon closer inspection, the inlay wasn't one piece of cut red stone, but thousands of little rubies, each sparkling in their own way. Asuka gasped. She reached out and stopped in mid-motion, looking dumbstruck. He took her hand, opened it palmed up, and placed the pendant into it.
What is this?
She asked. This is known as a set, the symbol of the Tao and the philosophy of the greater good. He tapped at the thumb-sized sigil. This is also a symbol of what my family has been searching for, the lesson my mother wanted to teach us, before she was taken away.
Your mother?
Asuka held it up to the light, and under the reddening sun it seemed to shimmer. All its elements shone, complementing each other perfectly. She began to swing it, ticking from side to side like a pendulum. The pendant had some weight to it. Could it be? Her eyes widened. Gold. Rubies. That wasn't silver. That was platinum. Holy shit! She held out her arm, letting it dangle from her thumb and index finger.
I can't accept this!
She said suddenly, almost shouting. Asuka?
I can't! This is too much! It's too valuable!
She whispered. She looked up at him, and her expression was almost begging.
It's too sudden!
She grimaced as if in pain.
What do you expect from me?
Kaworu shook his head. All I ask from you is to accept this. It's very important to me, but after all this time, I doubt if I'm still worthy to carry it. He looked so very forlorn about it. The greater good is yours to carry now. The pilot clasped the pendant into her palms and brought her hands to her chest. She looked down in almost a prayerful gesture.
And am I strong enough?
That tone, that heavy sincerity. It was the same. Damn the both of them. Why was it that they could send her heart spinning so easily? They had faith in her strength, and that made her feel really, really good. But at the same time, she recognised that being so hungry for that approval only meant that she still wasn't strong enough. Please, Miss Soyu, said Kaworu, I need you to have this. For all her talk about the immaturity of others, she was still very much inexperienced in the ways of the heart. She was, after all, just at 14, and her attempts to make others notice her as someone beyond her years only further alienated her from those who could have offered her true regard. She wanted that trust, that honest affection, but only at her terms, not theirs. She was still so afraid. Only 2 people thus far had ever given her their complete trust. No reservations at all, putting their lives and hearts in her hands. However, Shinji, he just couldn't make her feel as if the centre of his universe. Even when his focus was upon her, it felt like she should be honoured even for a slice of attention, fighting against something even more vast and important lurking there. Not to mention, of course, all those other girls and... No, not jealous, damn it. Kaworu felt like hers and hers alone. That was the gift, not some mere bauble. She turned her face up, and her lips opened slightly. She felt pressure upon them. She felt as if her strength was draining away. She was melting away into the warmth of his arms. It drained away her hesitation and filled it with something she couldn't identify, like a marker drawing designs upon her soul. It wasn't about lust. They didn't dare anything more. Like fireflies around the flame, circling that heat, knowing it could destroy them. It was about beating back for a time the ancient and primal fears slumbering within. She drank of that trust, devouring his need. She could only be truly strong when it was needed by others. It wasn't enough just for herself. Someone had to see it. And then, after a long while, she felt so weak and alone again. Asuka opened her eyes to see Kaworu smiling down, his eyes darkly triumphant. I would like to say I'm sorry, but I'm not. Asuka.
Kaworu-kun!
He put his forehead to hers. I admire you so very much, Asuka. Someday you will do something that will change the world forever. I want to be here to see it. The girl shivered. She was like wet clay in his hands. Her eyes were unfocused. She licked her lips. He stood up and stretched out. Well, it's getting late, isn't it? Aren't you expected back home by now? He said, holding out his hand for her to take. May I walk you home? It might be dangerous at night.
Screw 'em!
Asuka wanted to retort.
I can take care of myself.
She smiled brightly.
All right.
She was helped up to her feet. She let him put the pendant around her neck.
Thank you, Kaworu-kun.
It's the least of what I can do, said he. In silence did they walk towards her apartment, but with deep glances at each other now and then. A wall was broken, but there was now a strange pressure between them. Kaworu was not one to run in a scenario, and as such Asuka was perfect. He had to be there outside all realms of prediction. What made it all the more bitter was that he did indeed care for the girl. He would not sacrifice her lightly, only for something truly crushing in its scope. Asuka felt both elated and guilty. Everyone needed her for the Evangelion. The boys saw the body, the girls saw the personality. Very few could see the person. Anything other than her performance as a pilot was none of their business. What did it harm the greater good if she was selfish like this? She stopped. And what did it serve the greater good for them to interfere? He was hers alone. For them to know would seem to diminish that. This was her only pure joy. Asuka thought briefly about what it all meant to her, and while the Ava was clearly her reason for being, it was but a small portion of her days. She had no fears when it came to the Evangelion, but outside of it was where she dearly needed proof of her own power. The greater good, as presented by Kaworu, did not give her any power. It only opened her up to her own. She turned around and smiled sweetly.
I think I'll be okay from here.
All right. He bowed. Goodbye for now, Asuka.
Will I see you tomorrow?
I will have places to go, unfortunately. This was the only time I could actually be free to see you. He knew it was the one time the awareness of the young Kari would be directed elsewhere. To meet too soon was to be in a battle he couldn't win. But I will be staying here for a while.
Hey, just call then,
she said glibly, and with a final wave she was off on her way. The dark shape of the apartment block was already in sight. She was humming as she walked the rest of the way. Kaworu waited until she was gone. He then went over to a nearby building's stoop and sat down wearily. Asuka was an Evangelion pilot, and her shining soul was such almost overwhelming. He groaned. The mortal body was so weak. He could hardly believe that anyone could consider this a fair trade. So was the mortal heart. He had no plan. If he had a plan, Shinji Ikari would be able to find it and break it. He had to be the patient hunter, to ruin first his hopes, to bring him to despair. Only then could he hope to craft victory. Right, Shasso? He thought.
Shorten the reach. In eating the fruit of knowledge and seeing so far, they may only turn themselves into even greater fools. They shall all be crushed under the weight of their ambitions. Finally, we shall be avenged, my old friend.
Shinji still wasn't there when she arrived. The feeling of betrayal started to recede.
What could she and that girl still be doing?
Asuka clenched her fist. It wasn't as if he had already claimed her or vice versa. Shinji was willing to fight with her, just not for her. She still felt conflicted about that unfathomable forcefulness. Did she want to be claimed, like some sort of fairy princess? She scoffed. Yeah, right. She was at the very least the queen of what she surveyed. She touched the shape of the diadem hidden under her shirt. She felt angry. Yes. Jealousy? Fine, perhaps she could admit that. She felt like betraying him, even if he was such a goddamn estrogen magnet. At the same time, it was like he was betraying her as well. Being ignored was never a good thing for Asuka.
Fine!
She huffed under her breath. Let him play around for all she cared. She wasn't his toy to come running at his call. If he wanted her, he'd show that he was willing to fight for her. She yearned for that, such awesome dedication, from the only person she could conceivably call her equal. Being cast aside could only drive her to someone, anyone who could match her iron will. She felt the beating of her own heart. Her own humanity sought fulfillment. And she felt strong. Like she could take on all the world and win. As if any mind meeting hers would simply be torn to shreds by the force of her determination. Within her boiled uncertain forms of power.
Damn it!
She whispered. She still felt as if torn in two. Asuka was still somewhat giddy when she arrived. Of course, Misato had to call her out on that.
It's none of your business!
The girl screamed out abruptly and quickly closed herself off in her room. Misato just shrugged and went back to her beer. Teenagers. They just didn't make any sense. She was kind of an attention-seeking brat too, but never like that. Of course, she spent most of those years in a near catatonic state. Some might say she was still trying to make up for it. The place was just drowning in hormones. The first one to remark she was pushing 30 was so going to lose some teeth. 3 days later, and 16 days after Sandalphon's attack, the reports came in. The JSSDF Strategic Council had to call a special meeting for it. One of the generals, incidentally the same one that oversaw Jetalone's absorption into Project E, laughed and slapped at the sheaf of documents in his hand.
This is very well written,
said General Kiyosato Akira.
You can hardly even tell she's biased at all.
One of the other generals, this one older with a deeply lined round face and sparse fuzzy hair, he narrowed his gaze at his own documents. His eyes were milky behind his glasses, not just from age, but from looking into too many explosions during the chaotic reclamation period right after impact. "Is this all the intelligence we can get out of Tokyo-3?" said General Ryo Minara. General Sakata Asagiri was the youngest there, among the three in charge of that operation. He was nonetheless as grey-haired and weary as the rest, even if his face still looked relatively untouched by age. "Now Section 2 is being surprisingly thorough in making sure we keep to the terms of our defense agreement. Clandestine activities are specifically prohibited under that." "That's something a girl to Akari is acceptable?" General Asagiri shrugged. "Surprisingly, yes. There's nothing that says a new student may not enroll into that high school, even if she's from a military base. Of course she will be after information. We know that. Nerve knows that. At least it's a controlled situation, and he's getting..." "We've been friends for a long time, Asagiri, but if you say something like we sent that girl out to be a whore, I may need to punch you in the mouth," said General Akira in a flat tone. He rubbed at his bald pate. "It's not clandestine. They're still just teenagers. If she had any chance at all of seducing young Akari, Section 2 would have raised more of a stink." "Then this makes this information unreliable, if not suspect," said the eldest. General Minara sighed out and closed his eyes. He was always one for the direct approach. "This is a waste of time." "On the contrary, this is positively enlightening. With the amount of resources we've already given up for this agreement, we need to know just how well it can be put to use. They're teenagers. They might be saving the world, but they're still just teens. Now, will that be a significant factor in our strategy?" "You put too much faith into one boy," said General Minara, looking at General Akira. It was that man who had argued so hard for the production treaty, bringing the JSSDF to its new predicament. "It's too late," was the reply. "It's all already built. We need to send that invitation." He put his glasses back on and began reading the other reports. The bias of the two boys of Kirishima was very clear, but the judgment was the same. Musashi Lee Strasberg and Keita Asari had made their own inquiries about Shinji Ikari. They tried to do so as discreetly as possible. Unfortunately, they were so easily influenced by mana that they ended up asking about his personality, likes and dislikes along with the official list. That only made it seem like Ikari was starting to attract attention from both sides of the river. They were understandably upset, even enraged, at finding out they were at the root of that rumour. Unfortunately, their manly tears and hugs of brotherhood and common suffering only added to that impression.
You're my friends and I respect you deeply," said Mana. "I won't think badly of you or anything you do, no matter what the others say."
She was stuttering and blushing badly even as she said so. Her research of romance through manga had introduced her to the concept of yaoi. She felt her nose stuffing up again. She fled from them. They both screamed out in frustration and further cursed the name Ikari. The time came when they could actually face him in direct competition in the school sports festival. They entered into that with bloody murder in their minds. Musashi won against him handily in ping-pong. Keita had an easy victory in chess.
He's not so great," said the more athletic of the two, while sipping from a carton of orange juice. He leaned against the wall and watched the students going about their activities in the courtyard. Shinji was seated with his friends, Ida and Suzuhara, and conversing without any regrets. "I'm hardly old at all. What the hell are they talking about?"
"I can feel hostile gazes burning a hole into my back," muttered Keita, munching on melon bread. He stood there facing away from the rest of the class. "Something feels wrong, Sashi. Don't you feel it's all a little too easy?"
"He's just overrated, that's all."
Ikari was shut out of the competition, and they watched furtively as he sat there with his friends, conversing without any regret over his dismal performance. They were in a different homeroom from Mana. As the games progressed, they had to face her class again. Musashi had to compete against Asuka. They gave each other confident smirks. The girls stood with such complete arrogance. It was even awesome to behold in a way that made one ask if they trusted their eyes. He could respect that fire. His blood was burning too. But just because she was a pilot and a girl was no reason for him to hold back. He was trained in combat and command, all the life he'd known as of hardship, and he was being toughened up with every passing day to handle a life full of such pains and sacrifices. Asuka was a pilot, made to handle an unimaginably powerful war machine, to wrestle with a power that wasn't hers, to fight unknown enemies in savage close combat. She demolished him. Asuka's fire simply could not be put out. Her reflexes were honed by keeping up with strikes and counter-strikes that sometimes seemed to border on the precognitive. He slumped to the ground, kneeling, and hearing as if a loud gong in the distance. Keita never entered into things with too much confidence. He knew his limits. However, he was interested, when learning that it was Rei who rated there, to know hers. As far as he knew, she'd never joined the chess club. He said to her of his hope of a good game. She nodded briefly. Although fit and ready to fight, he was made for strategy. He pored over doctrines and philosophy, all in an attempt to understand whatever enemies waited in the dark future and prepare for them ahead of time. Rei had at best a rudimentary knowledge about a lot of things. She crushed him. She played like a machine, capable of thinking simultaneously so many moves ahead, always making the correctly advantageous move. She put her pieces down just moments right after he made his carefully considered moves. She was already so used to splitting her thoughts and her attentions. He slumped back on his chair, open mouth, and hearing as if a loud gong in the distance. The day passed, and soon enough it was over. They were among those volunteered for clean-up duty. They watched as the students all left, Ikari among them. He was, as usual, flanked by Ayanami to the right and Soryu to the left. It irked them to see Mana had joined that group, on the left after Asuka, invited to dinner that night. The two girls faced resolutely away from each other, their cheeks puffed in indignation.
"Monsters," said Musashi. "Those girls are monsters."
"Oh, come on," replied Keita, making a shushing gesture. "Just because they have their talents doesn't diminish us. Although," he frowned and leaned on his broom, "in that case, why is Ikari then considered the strongest among the pilots? Is his talent something that's useless outside of the Evangelion?"
"Maybe they're holding back for his sake,"
like they were wont to do sometimes for Mana's fragile self-esteem. Musashi hunched over and shook his fist.
"Damn that Ikari, playing with innocent girls' hearts like that."
The other looked sheepish. "I'm sure that's not—"
"You're both just going to get even more silly from here on, aren't you?"
They heard the whisper, so close to their ears, in the voice of Inquisitor Hiraki. Both boy spies leapt in surprise, their brooms nearly spinning right out of their hands. They turned to see her standing behind them, arms akimbo and a red jacket draped over her shoulders. She looked faintly amused. She had her still in those little ponytails, but had replaced the cherry beads with small skull hair ties. A small blush rose on their faces. This school was so full of such strange and wonderful girls. What do you mean?" Keita managed to say, after a while.
Asuka and Rei, they don't hold back against anyone as a sign of respect. Shinji gives them that same respect. He gives them his anything.
She shrugged and held her arms open in an ornate, what gesture.
Only against each other it isn't unfair.
"That's insulting,"
shouted Musashi.
Is it? The worth of power is to protect the weak, be wielded in defense of light.
Though taller than them, Hikari patted their heads as if children and seemed to loom over them.
If you must know about Shinji-kun, then know that at least. It's not for cheating. It's not for showing off.
"Then—"
They both looked confused. What was this power people kept going on about? Super strength? Laser vision? Oh crap, telepathy? Hikari moved her hands down and stroked at the sides of their faces. They froze up. Their completely military upbringing was sheltered in its own way. Of all the girls they'd ever met, only Mana was cute in that way, though she was not as well liked by her peers. The other girls had their own charms but left unpolished by their severity. Hikari Hiraki had a keen sense of both grim responsibility and her own soft femininity. I know why you're here. Her tone of voice was so gentle and motherly, but also in that precise timbre they could recognise as in deadly purpose. But nobody here really cares. Least of all him. He's like that. He won't waste what he has without reason. Ask around all you want, but don't judge anyone until you do know what it is he has to go through. She pinched at their cheeks. Do you understand? He's our friend. There was more than just a Kari waiting to fight in Tokyo-3. They nodded, slightly awestruck. Hikari drew her hand back and smiled cheerily. Good! And it was as if sunshine had suddenly returned to that corridor. It was all too jarring, but then Hikari had never made a secret of her bipolarity. Everyone had already grown used to that, her own sanity constantly under assault by constantly being around Shinji and company. Keep up the good work. Please don't stay too late. And she was off, her book bag slung over her shoulder and humming a happy tune as she went on her way back home. They were left with a feeling that they had never known before. Something like deep, deep fear. Or, they knew girls could be badass too. They just never realised it could be shown even outside of combat. The two JSSDF boys soldiers stood there motionless for a minute or so. In sending the young spies, perhaps it should have been considered that they were just as woefully susceptible as Kirishima. Girls are scary, said Musashi, holding his broom numbly. Amen, brother, replied Keita. Amen. Perhaps we should pity Hikari. Two large black craft were at it full speed. Wet barrens spread out before them. Even animals stayed away from the wastes of the cities. The once glorious megalopolis were useful for farming under all that concrete, and no one wanted to live in the darkly ominous empty buildings. This used to be old Tokyo, you know, said Misato, holding a radio up to her ear. She was inside Ava Carrier 1, looking out the window. The Avas were mounted face down on their transports. The old Jet-Alone proving grounds aren't too far away. All of a sudden she was struck with the memory of what happened the last time they were around the place. Misato glanced aside at her friend, sitting there so still. She hoped none of that insanity would be necessary the second time. What a dump! Replied Asuka from the other carrier. It is not an unusual sight, said Ray, in the craft carrying the red Ava. She held the other radio and spoke into the open frequency. Captain Kataragi, I am still uneasy. Is it wise to leave Tokyo-3 defenceless? Think of it this way, Ray. We already deployed the Evangelions. The JSSDF are fuel ready for us when we land. If we get word of an angel attack, we can be just about anywhere in 5 minutes. Still, all 3 pilots, 2 Evangelions, Ritsuko-senpai, me, you, Mana commented, seated facing Ray. I'm surprised Commander Carey would let us all go easily like that, even if we're all invited by the JSSDF. Why didn't he come himself? That invitation was rather insistent. So far we've been in good terms with the boys in green, and in the interest of keeping that, we're honouring their request. We are here to pick up a few toys for the Avas. Misato grinned. We just can't look ungrateful now, can we? Ritsuko leaned over to speak. With the end of the Jet Alone project, we entered into a production contract. They still have little idea of many of Evangelion systems, but in the manufacture of parts and weapons this is much more convenient. We no longer need to wait for Nerve Germany and Nerve China for repairs and additional equipment in case of attack. Well, we can't afford to look ungrateful about that. I don't think having Commander Akari around would be good for that. Even Shinji chuckled weakly at the idea. This wasn't just worth the elder Akari's time, even if out of politeness the invitation included him. No one could even imagine him ever saying thank you to anyone, no matter what gifts they had. Misato-san. Yes, Shinji-kun. Do you know why they were so insistent on having 2 Avas for the demonstration? It was Maya who answered. Offhand, I can only think it has something to do with the AT field. We know a harmonic AT field can accomplish... She paused, almost able to see Ritsuko's eyebrows twitching. Feats! They might need to test something against that. And if it could break through an Evangelion's AT field, then the chances are good it would be likewise effective against angels, added Ray. Can't this thing go any faster? Asuka whined out into the comm and directed at the pilot. Oh shit! We just got painted by targeting radar! The pilot of Carrier 1 spat suddenly. The transport lurched in its flight path. Confirmed, said the other pilot. Are there SAMs in the area? Oh, wait, he said to himself. Stupid question. The JSSDF was there. It was a military test bed. Of course there'd be air defence.
What the hell?
Misato got up and grabbed a hanging handhold. She tilted over to look at the cockpit. We're being locked on by several radar ways, possibly of the mobile type, replied Makoto, leaning over in his seat to speak through the open door. It's all in the hunter-killer band.
Okay, this didn't happen the last time,
muttered Misato.
Can you raise them on radio? Maybe it's just a precaution.
The lieutenant adjusted his headset and fiddled with the controls. After a while, he shook his head and reported back. It's no good. It's just static. Either they're being jammed or they're deliberately not responding. Heat sources! Yelled the pilot beside him. A loud beeping issued from the panels, filling the air. They're not fighters!
Missiles!
Exclaimed Misato. She said back down and hurriedly secured her safety belt.
Evasive manoeuvres!
Great! How? This figures all the manoeuvrability of a flying brick! Was the pilot's reply. Nonetheless, the plane attempted to veer off and sending loose things spilling all over inside. Everyone hung onto their seats.
What's happening? Is someone shooting at us?
Asuka asked. She could feel the change in inertia, the high-pitched beeping. She gripped the controls tightly as the entry plug was still empty of LCL. Her Evangelion tried to look up, but saw only the dark shape of the aircraft above its neck.
Should I raise the AT field?
Don't raise the AT field! Shinji and Ritsuko shouted at the same time.
The AT field is a region of phase-shifted space. This is what the Evangelion uses to create a variety of useful effects. Normally this isn't a problem. However, this is something travelling at several hundred kilometres per hour, said Ritsuko, rubbing at her forehead. If the AT field hardens to take a missile hit, then we're just going to run into it, finished Shinji. The Evangelion might survive, Rei had to add. These aircraft will certainly not. Asuka huffed. Well, we have to do something! Misato! I'm thinking!
Uncaring of propriety, Makoto yelled back into the opening. Well, whatever it is, it better be quick! I've got missiles inbound and... Oh my god. His voice petered out as he turned to see the coming contrails. There's hundreds of them! We're hit! We're hit! The pilot started shouting out. Flash! A multitude of bright lights and hard sounds. The transport spun out of control.